how does blood flow through the heart? How does blood flow through the heart? Now, the right side of the heart, blood enters the heart through two large veins. Blood that is emptied into the heart is emptied via the inferior vena cava and the superior vena cava. The inferior vena cava drains the deoxygenated blood from the lower extremity, from the lower part of the body, while the superior vena cava drains deoxygenated blood from the upper part of the body. So both inferior vena cava and superior vena cava drains this deoxygenated blood down into the right chambers of the heart. Particularly, they drain this deoxygenated blood into the right atrium. Into the right atrium. So, as the right atrium contracts, blood flows from the right atrium into the right ventricle through the opening of the tricuspid valve. So, the blood that is in the right chambers of the heart is deoxygenated blood. Now, when the ventricle is full, the tricuspid valve will actually close. So the closing of this tricuspid valve prevents the blood from flowing backward into the atria while the ventricle contracts. And when this ventricle contracts, we have another valve that is going to open. And this valve is the pulmonary valve. Remember, you were told in your high school or in your secondary school that all arteries carries oxygenated blood except the pulmonary artery. So in this case, the pulmonary valve open and the deoxygenated blood that is emptied into the right ventricle enters the pulmonary artery. So the pulmonary artery carries this oxygenated blood to the lungs, where the deoxygenated blood becomes oxygenated. And when the blood becomes oxygenated, the oxygenated blood now returns to the left chambers of the heart, particularly the left atrium, through the pulmonary vein. So blood that leaves the lungs returns to the left chambers of the heart, and pulmonary vein carry this oxygenated blood to the left atrium. Remember, all veins carries deoxygenated blood except the pulmonary vein. So the blood that is emptied into the pulmonary vein is rich in oxygen. So in the left side of the heart, we have the pulmonary veins carrying the oxygen-rich blood from the lungs to the left atrium. So as the atrium contracts, blood flows from the left atrium into the left ventricle through the opening of the bicuspid or mitral valve. So when the ventricle is full, the mitral valve is closed. So this prevents blood from flowing back into the left atrium while the ventricle contracts. And then the ventricle contracts, and then blood leaves this ventricle and gets into the aorta when the aortic valve is open. So you will see that the major function of these valves is to ensure that blood is not returning back from where it was coming from. So you see, each chamber of the heart gets filled. When the chamber of the heart is filled up, these valves open and blood leaves a particular chamber to the next chamber. Blood from the right atrium that is rich in carbon dioxide, or that is deoxygenated blood, is pumped into the right ventricle when the tricuspid valve opens, and then the right ventricle sends this blood into the pulmonary artery when the pulmonary valve opens, and then the blood from the pulmonary artery is taken to the lungs for oxygenation. The oxygenated blood returns back to the heart, and this time around it gets to the left chambers of the heart via the pulmonary vein. The pulmonary vein empties this oxygen-rich blood into the left atrium. The bicuspid valve opens, and then blood is emptied into the left ventricle. When the ventricle contracts, the left ventricle contracts, the aortic valve opens, and blood leaves the left ventricle into the aorta. And then that oxygen-rich blood from the left part of the heart is now ready to get into the system. Remember, When we started in our first class, we said that the cardiovascular system, one of the properties of this system is that it has two pressure beds, the pulmonary circulation and then the systemic circulation. Alright, so this summarizes the blood flow. So here we have the body, deoxygenated blood from the lower extremity is carried to the right atrium via inferior vena cava, and if it is from the upper extremity, it is carried to the right atrium via the superior vena cava. The tricuspid valve open and blood from the right atrium is emptied into the right ventricle. The pulmonary valves open and blood gets to the pulmonary artery and then is taken to the lungs. Blood from the lungs is carried by the pulmonary vein to the left atrium, and then the bicuspid valve open. Blood from the left atrium is emptied into the left ventricle. The aortic valves open and blood returns back to the body. So you now see that blood flow in the cardiovascular system should be a unidirectional. A valve open, blood leaves a particular area in the heart and is emptied into the next part of the heart. Right. This also summarizes the blood circulation in the heart. Now, the blue color you are seeing there represents deoxygenated blood, while the red color you are seeing in the structure of the heart represents the oxygenated blood. So in our next class, we are going to look at the cardiac muscle itself and the mechanism of contraction of the cardiac muscle. See you in our next class.